Manuela, at the age of 19, you had a near-death experience. Can you tell us what was the event leading up to this experience? Well, at that time I was doing an apprenticeship as a florist, when all of a sudden I suffered severe abdominal pain, and I was unable to walk. I then called my boyfriend, who was at his home, and asked him to pick me up. And thereupon we went to the hospital, where an ultrasound was performed, which showed an ovarian cyst, which was almost about 5 inches in size. I was told I had to have surgery immediately because there was a risk that the cyst could rotate, thereby pinching off the blood supply to the ovary. Well, at this point, I wasn't given much choice, so I had to stay in the hospital. Well, the surgery was then performed, and I was told that this would just be a routine operation, and the next day I could be discharged from hospital. The surgeon, however, had unfortunately damaged the surrounding intestinal tissue during the operation, whereupon serious secondary bleeding occurred, which was not discovered in good time. After the operation, I had severe pain, and when I had been administered a maximum of painkillers, they found that my hemoglobin level was decreasing, and then they also realized quite quickly that I had lost a lot of blood, and that for this reason I had to undergo a further operation. In the second operation, they made the mistake of proceeding laparoscopically. That is, they used gas to expand the abdominal volume with the expectation that this method would provide a better view in order to be able to work safely with the surgical instruments and the cameras. Unfortunately, the tissues, having already been injured before by the gas, had additionally been damaged now, with the result that I lost even more blood. And, well, all this then led up to the catastrophe that the bleeding couldn't be stopped anymore, and that blood transfused into my body ran out as quickly as it was transfused. And as a consequence of this, I had to be transferred to another hospital urgently, where I had to have surgery once again, but this time using an abdominal incision. And when the surgeons were preparing this procedure, I saw them using the scalpel on my belly. And at first, I wasn't sure. Well, actually, I was a bit shocked after having seen this, because I was awake, and I told the surgeons that. I told them that I was still awake, whereupon I immediately felt a hand push my head backwards, and I also felt a mask. Then it became dark again, and I was anesthetized. But thereupon I entered a sort of suction that was pulling me upwards. And suddenly I saw myself from above, as from a bird's perspective. So I saw my body lying there and being operated upon, whereas I myself was awake. So I still saw all this. Also, what the surgeon was doing. I saw everything. But I didn't have pain, and I wanted to speak with the surgeon to ask him, "What are you doing there? I'm fine. You can stop the surgery." But then I realized that they didn't hear what I was saying. And I also was somewhat shocked because I didn't understand at all what was going on, whether I was dead now or whatever it was. And at this very moment, this shocking moment, it became dark again. And once again, I was drawn into a suction, and I was really pulled into this suction, whereupon I saw the whole of my life, up to the time of my birth. And I experienced this as if I were watching TV. Well, what I knew in that moment was that this is my body that was lying there, but I also had all my feelings, And on top of that, I felt what other people were feeling. So I really relived the most emotional moments of my life. It was not only that I had my own feelings, but I also had exactly the same feelings as my counterpart, as if I were both. And all this was very extraordinary, above all because of one of these moments. I have a father, originally from Italy, who had a very hard childhood because he had had to go to Switzerland when he was only 13, and there were 7 children, and his mother was alone. And in Switzerland, there was an uncle where he had to go in order to work and to then send home the earned money. As a child, I had experienced my father as a very cold person who could not express his feelings. And as a child, I felt that he didn't like me, because he neither played with me, nor was he capable of embracing me. And for me, as a child, all this was simply a bit sad. And for a long time, I didn't understand the reason for this. But at that precise moment, I experienced a scene from the time when my father was coming home. At that time, I was still a baby, starting my first steps. Well, he came home with his car, and I knew that he was my father, and I was so happy to see him when he got out of his car. And at that moment, I was on a grassy meadow, and I turned round to him. I had such pleasure that he was coming home, and he was happy too. And although still a baby, I was already able to feel his joy. And he came up to me when he saw that I was trying to stand up. And these were really my first steps, the first steps I had taken toward him. And I really re-experienced these steps. And this was as if I was suddenly standing up, feeling twice as big as before, and rather shaky at that. And then I took these tentative steps toward him. And then he supported me by grabbing my arms with his hands, and then he lifted me up. And when he did this, I felt him. I actually felt him throughout the whole experience, whereby I also realized how he loved me, and that he was a proud father. And, well, this was really something. Actually, this scene was the most valuable for me, because I had never experienced this with him on a physical level. And it was so nice to really experience in this way his true feelings, which he has never been able to show. Then it further continued back to the time of my birth and even beyond. I was then, well, it became dark again, and it felt as if I had some ribbon attached, reaching from my belly button to my breast, which one could not see, but it felt as if something was lifting me, or better still, was lifting my body, and my arms were hanging back, and now I was floating toward a very beautiful light. And this light was so warm and so beautiful. It felt as if it was pure love, or as if someone deeply loves me. And it went upwards relatively fast, and it also felt as if I was dissolving in this light, because suddenly I no longer felt my physical boundaries, and I merged with this light, as if it was warm there, or as if it was warm wax. The feeling I had then is difficult to describe, because I've never experienced this feeling here on earth. It was so intense, comparable to certain individual feelings one can have here. For example, like flying, merging, pure freedom, pure love. And in a way, it also felt a bit like an orgasm, so to speak. Actually, you can't describe it in words, because it was the most beautiful feeling I have ever experienced. And because it was so intense, I definitely have never forgotten about it. And, well, It was simply beautiful. But thereupon it suddenly became dark again, and I woke up once again in my aching body, not knowing what had happened. Next to me, I saw a cleaning lady washing the floor, and I asked her, "What has happened? What am I doing here?" Whereupon she replied that she would try to get the nurse, because she didn't know either what had happened. In any case, I was told the facts about what had happened, and I also had about 10 quarts of water in my body. For example, I could neither move my hands anymore because they were too puffy, nor could I move my head or my body. So I was confined to bed for 2 weeks, and after that I was wheelchair bound for another 2 weeks. And I actually had to relearn everything, for example, to eat, to walk, because my intestines were removed, then implanted again, which was a physical shock for me, from which I had a hard time recovering. My life was no longer the same as before, and I also was no longer able then to practice my profession as before. What I mean is that being on my feet all day long, that was no longer possible. What did this near-death experience bring about for you? Did your worldview consequently change? This experience didn't bring about any immediate change. Although I found it difficult to integrate it, the first thing I can remember are my parents coming into my room and my impression of feeling everyone in a way as if their feelings were also mine. And this impression has never disappeared. When my parents first saw me, I felt their shock as if it was my own. And I felt a bitter pain to have to say to them first, "Please leave," because I couldn't bear their pain. And this is the change that has remained with me. So I have become much more sensitive, feeling other people as if their feelings would be mine. And for me, this was just like an expansion of awareness. And also my parents have told me that I hadn't the same personality as before. I have gone through a personality change, also due to the fact that I have become much more sensitive. Therefore, it was important for me to do a job that fulfills me. Well, at first it was very important for me to become well again. I have never believed in God. In fact, I didn't believe in anything. Neither do I belong to a religion. But now I started to pray. Because of what I had experienced, I was convinced that there is more than merely this world or this body. So despite my poor health and the fact that I couldn't do very much, I prayed that this divine power would show me a way, in case my life still has a purpose. And indeed, 2 weeks after having prayed this, I met 3 people who recommended yoga to me. And I didn't know anything about this, so I Googled yoga, and then I read and realized that it has a Hindu and Buddhist background. So at first I gave up on this idea because I thought that it had something to do with a religion, and because I didn't know at that time that yoga has nothing to do with religion, but that it is simply the origin of this tradition without being part of any religion. But nevertheless, I didn't want to do yoga. But just for the reason that this was such a strong sign coming from on high, I decided that it's a last attempt when trying yoga, because I had already tried so many therapies, and none of them had really helped me. But as I said, I took this last possibility to try out yoga. Of course, I couldn't join a group with my suffering body, So I first had to take private lessons where I could only do breathing exercises at first. But these yoga techniques were a miracle for me because after a half a year, my pain had been reduced by about 50%, and after a whole year, I had almost regained my quality of life. And I also could deal constructively with my life and with my body again. And this, of course, was the greatest gift for me of all. And then I had all possibilities once again. And I had my life back, and I was so thankful for this that I decided to sell everything I possessed in Switzerland in order to really pursue my own path, because I really wanted to know everything about yoga. And so I started a training as a yoga teacher, actually in order to learn everything about yoga. Where did you undergo this yoga training? From my earliest childhood on, I always had wanted to go to Australia, but I've never had enough money to do so. And in this way, I simply decided to realize my dream, this Australia. Well, I got a visa for 1 year, because I also have a European passport, a so-called working holiday visa, which Swiss people unfortunately cannot obtain. And with this visa, I was able to study there for 1 year and also to work a bit in order to be able to finance my studies. Are you still afraid of death? No. On the contrary, because I know that my death actually was my greatest experience, and because for me, it felt as if I returned to my human origins, to this light or this energy, where I really was heartily and truly welcomed. Manuela, thank you very much for this interview, and a big thanks to you also.